Hey Bears, how's everybody doing tonight? You know, I've had a long day, but I wanted to get some thoughts in before I headed out to bed here. I just spent pretty much all of yesterday afternoon and most of throughout the middle of the night and over into late morning in a car with two of my kids at a time and three dogs and my beautiful wife. And we were driving from Illinois to Texas. And my dad was also caravanning in front of us in his car with my other two kids. Yeah, I think he just had two of the boys at any given time. So that was quite a long journey. As you can probably tell from the state of my face, those cycles are pretty deep right now. I can't imagine four dogs, dear Lord in heaven, but yeah, Owen, hats off to you, Sir Big Bear, for being able to do that and get all the way to Washington on your own. Great Scott, man. Or, I guess quarter Jew, whatever you happen to be. But I don't even know if he'll ever see this, but boy, I saw his little clip talking about his thoughts today on how maybe he just doesn't need to dig back at people where it doesn't make a difference. It's not important. And previous to that, I'd been thinking about listening this Dr. Peterson interview at a forum that I can't remember the name of now, but I'd been listening to it while I was driving through the night, and Dr. Peterson had said a couple things that really cut me to the quick. I was like, wow, I need to really think about this and embrace this. And then I feel like what Owen's thoughts were about kind of the things Rogan had been talking to him about. Rogan, I talk about him like I know him because I watch him so much. I used to do the same thing with one of my favorite Bible teachers, Dr. Chuck Missler. Dr. Chuck, I used to call him, and it was almost like I knew him, even though I'd never met him before in my life, and I had listened to literally hundreds upon hundreds of hours worth of his materials. So it was a different experience for me. But I think I kind of start to feel like that with other cats that I end up watching in YouTube, throughout that sphere. You start to feel a little bit of a connectivity, even though that's just superficial. It's just from afar. You don't really know them, but you kind of understand what they're trying to say. You understand their methods of communication, right? So when they're making a point, if you're attuned to listening to them, you can pick up right away, and something that they're saying can impact you very quickly. I think sometimes things that folks like Big Bear and Rogan and Crowder and some of them, sometimes some of the things that they say now hit me more deeply than they did maybe a year or two ago when I had been digging into some of their stuff. And it's because at least in some part, I've become more accustomed to the way they communicate. But I'm kind of getting off subject here a little bit, and that's okay. This is still a part of it. Just, it's worthwhile to think about. But the bigger point that I wanted to address was that yesterday, as I was prepping 4 children and 3 dogs and my beautiful wife and my father to all go on this trip, I found many moments where I was pretty frustrated. I was getting angry at people, and I was sometimes justified to let my kids know, okay, you need to obey. You need to get this done. You need to go ahead and get in the car now. This is the 4th time I've had to say it. I shouldn't say it more than once. We need to make this happen quickly. But I wasn't nearly this calm the entire time. I was getting pretty irate, and at one point, one of my sons started to make a joke about something. And I thought he was saying something that was deprecating to me, um, because he thought that was cute and funny to do. And I don't like my kids to be doing things that um, are going to cause them to potentially have a rift in relationship with me that I could come to resent later. I want them to know that certain behaviors are acceptable and certain are not. I'm not going to deprecate them and cut them down. I don't think that's useful to them, and I don't think they should be doing the same. But I jumped the gun. I was wrong. I misinterpreted his words in that moment. And, um, he was upset about that at first. And I had to immediately check myself and apologize and say, listen, I'm sorry that I misunderstood what you were saying, but at the outset, this is what I had thought you were trying to say. If that had been the case, then it was my job to correct you, because that's not a productive behavior for you. But since it wasn't, and I misread that, I'm sorry. And I had to apologize to all of them at one point and say, I know I've been shorter with you today at times already, and we haven't even gotten started. I need to check that. I can still do my job as a dad and not have to be that way. We were already like 2-3 hours past the time that we had hoped to get on the road, and so I knew we were never going to get in anytime early. We really didn't want to be spending money to stop over somewhere. That's just unnecessary. But we weren't going to get much sleep in the cars either, so it was just going to be a painful journey to get there. And my hope was to minimize that, but that didn't work out that way. And so I was frustrated. But after that situation with my son, I had to stop and think, this is not how I want this trip to go. I don't want to be this way throughout the whole trip. So I had to intentionally choose to try and be less frustrated. And that's really tough to do, especially when you have dogs trying to jump in your lap while you're driving, or up into the front seat crushing your coffee that's supposed to help you stay up at night, and getting that spilled. And knowing that you're going to have to clean this rental vehicle that you're using when you're done. All these thoughts come into mind. So, yeah, I was wrestling with a bunch of that stuff throughout the day. But as I listened to Doc Peterson last night, there was something that he talked about. He said, what did Doc Peterson say that struck me? Well, I'll come back to that. Let me talk about what Big Bear said today that struck me, because that's more directly connected to this. Big Bear had said, that it didn't matter that this individual called him a white supremacist on some interview, and he wanted to make this dig at her, saying her face looked like a melted candle, and that's clearly not the case, with this person. But it was, as he put it, was like a perfect insult, and he realized, I don't need to do that. Like, I'm not gonna lose anything by not answering that. I'm not gonna lose any face by not responding unnecessarily, inappropriately. In fact, I can become weaker, maybe. I think it was what I extrapolated out of that. Maybe he didn't say it that way, but I think that was the message, that he could even become weaker by responding unnecessarily. It's not going to help him. It's just going to spread more negativity, as he thought. It was just, it really struck me. It was like, wow, I'm going through the same kind of thing, in my own way, but I'm dealing with it with the people I love. I got to get it right there. I got to get it right there in that situation with those people, because that's super important. That's the most important area to get it right in, relationship-wise. And they're not out to attack me. That's not their goal, So if I'm feeling edgy, I need to notice that sooner and start taking steps to deal with it. That's, I think, super important so that I don't unleash my lack of emotional control and patience, or lack of patience on others. But Dr. Peterson said something too in that interview that I was watching, and that's another element to this whole thing that struck me. He had said, don't, I don't want to speak now on areas where I don't think I truly understand what it is I'm saying. Because he says, I've done that before in the past, and I felt like that made me weaker because I just was almost parroting what I think I believed, and I didn't really fully understand it yet. It wasn't my knowledge. So that makes me a little more, like thinking about that, this makes me want to be a little more on the ball as a teacher, to really know that what I'm teaching my students is something I genuinely know and hold to be true. And when I can't do that, when I know there's an area where I can't totally do that, I point them in the area of someone that I believe does have that information to the best of my ability. But I feel like I really ought to just put more effort into giving each student a more comprehensive and complete lesson experience where I'm even more invested in what I'm sharing with them, because I don't just believe this to be the truth because other people that are really smart about it have told me. I've experienced it in my own playing, or I've experienced it in my own practice life. In some small parts I have in most of the things that I teach, but I think that should probably be magnified so that the benefit from my education to the student is maximized. That really ought to be the case. And I think this is probably true in all areas of our life. We ought to be making sure that any communications we have with people are based from places we, as best we can, because there's a lot of things we're not going to understand, but as best we can, that we understand. We're not just parroting stuff that sounds good, because people can detect phony quick. And sometimes you can't detect your own phony, and that's important. You need to be around people who can help you navigate your own phoniness, when it's not the best you it could be, and always be working to make it better. I found this picture now that we're down at my folks' house. This picture right here. That man is my grandfather, Nanky John Rademacher, and next to him is his wife, Bertha Arnold Rademacher. And Grandpa Nanky, he passed away, I think in his mid-30s. And then Grandma Bertha, like I had mentioned that in my other Bear Before Dark video from the other week. She raised my grandpa and the other 5 kids to adult age. And I got looking at that face, and I started thinking about what he might have gone through in his life, what different experiences he faced, and how he faced them. How well was he able to recognize his own failings at times and check himself when his attitude was wrong, and refocus so that he could move forward with the least amount of damage to himself and others as possible. When I look into that face, there's a part of me that I think wants to believe that that was the kind of man he was. And from what stories I've heard and learned about him, I know him to be that kind of a man, very noble. I know that of my grandfather, and if that says anything about Grandpa Nanky, or what I know of my Grandpa John, my great-great-Grandpa John, which was great-Grandpa Nanky's dad, he was definitely of well repute within the community. So it just makes me think, boy, I want to live up to that. I want to emulate that in my life. And then it brought me this evening to notice this book on the shelves here at home, Finding God in the Psalms, by Arthur E. Perry. and that was my mom's dad. We lost him in 2000, I want to say it was 2010, I believe. I could be wrong now. Maybe it wasn't quite that long ago. I'm having trouble remembering when he passed. But yeah, we lost him some years ago, and he was an ardent studier of the scriptures. He really wanted to go down deep, stay down long, come up, just soaked with knowledge. And not just knowledge, but relationship. And there was a particular reading of his that he had written down here. Let's see here. See if I can find it. Psalm 51. Psalm 51, that's page 105. And his writing's there, his title for what he extracted out of this. That's what strikes me here. I think it's worth checking into a little bit. So he reads part of this. He says, the psalmist tells us this, that as well as other truths that we need to know. Be merciful, O Lord, to me because of your loving kindness. Blot out my transgressions because of your compassion. Cleanse me of my iniquity and purify me from my sin. I know my transgressions. I am ever conscious of my sin. I have sinned against you. I have committed evil in your eyes. You are just when you speak, and you are pure when you judge. Purge me with hyssop. That was like this plant that had big leaves on it with like scrubby, like bristly things all over it. And if you wanted to get clean, you would probably use some hyssop because it could scrub really well. And it was just a plant that grew naturally for this. Purge me with hyssop that I might be made clean. Wash me that I might be white as snow. Speak to me both joy and gladness, that my bones crushed by sin against you, that those bones may rejoice. Conceal your face from my sins while blotting out my iniquities. Like, don't even look at it. It's filthy. I don't want you to see it. I'm embarrassed. Lord, create my heart new and clean. Renew a ready spirit within me. Allow me still into your presence. Don't take your Holy Spirit from me. Let me again rejoice in your salvation. Strengthen me with a willing spirit so I might teach wrongdoers your ways, so that sinners will be turned to you. Save me from my bloody deed, God, my Lord and my Savior. Then I will proclaim your righteousness. Lord, do open my mouth so that I might praise you. You do not desire a sacrifice. You do not desire burnt offering. True sacrifice to you is a broken spirit. You accept the heart which is broken and crushed. Now, he observed from reading this is Grandpa Art's observations, how merciful that when I sin, God sends someone I trust to restore me. 2, I have a sin nature from Adam, and I commit sins, but both are under the blood. Number 3, as great as my sin is, God's grace is greater. So in his response to reading this psalm, he says, Lord, you are both holy and compassionate. You're without sin. You're without in any kind of lawlessness whatsoever. You are just. You are holy, right? Nobody's like you. And you're compassionate at the same time, right? So it's like you can be all about what the rules are, but you can be all about compassion. They're for him, it's not a dichotomy. You know what I mean? You will not allow me to hide my sin. You're not going to let it go unnoticed. For during my silence, your weight is upon me until I confess my sin unto you. Lord, how can you be so forgiving? Why do you love me so? I know forgiveness means living, and silence is separation from you. When I confess, I stand in amazement that I had sinned and that you did forgive me. That's my Grandpa Art. And you know, I remember Owen saying something about this recently. Or was it Owen? Maybe I learned this in at the planetarium. We were at the museum, my kids and I, last week with my dad and my wife, and they were talking about the different constellations, like Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. Well, and maybe it was Owen that talked about this too. There was another constellation that was called Arcturus, and there's this word. Is it Arcturus or Arcturo? I can't remember, but it has something to do with a bear, and it's where we get the name Arthur, right? It descended from that. So my Grandpa Art, he's got the term for bear right there is a connection from his name, right? It's a descendancy, if you will, from that term for bear. So I've had bear stuff going on in my family for a while now, and I didn't even realize it. That's mind-blowing to me. That's flippin' cool. Thoughts from a bear to this bear. He was definitely Big Bible Bear. That would be his honorary bear name if there ever was one. I don't know what that is. It's got to be like a coffee maker, a dishwasher or something. Well, I've been at it for a little over 20 minutes here, just giving some thoughts before I head to the bed. But getting pissed off on a road trip with my entire family. And it leads me to stop and say, I'm wrong, and I don't want to stay that way. And I'm grateful that I don't have to stay that way, that I have the privilege to get to grow, to get to move beyond this. I don't want to ruin my family. I want to build them, as much as I can. And I'm tired. Oh, goodness. Well, Bears, I hope this is uplifting to somebody tonight. Man, all these things I've been talking throughout the week, these different little weird things about my family and stuff like that, here it all connects together at the end of this week, after I'm just exhausted, realizing all this stuff seems to fit a little bit. Big Bible Bear had a lesson for his big drum bear years after he's been departed, to knit together all these other events. So grateful for my family, both on my dad and my mom's side. Unbelievable. Bears, I love y'all. Peace.